וישלח אותו פדן ארם לקחת לו משם אישה ברכך אותו ויצב עליו לאמור לא תיקח אישה מבנות כנען וישמע יעקב אל אביו ואל אמו וילך פדנה ארם וירא עשיו כי ראות בנות כנען בעיני יצחק אביו וילך עשיו אל ישמעאל ויקח את מחלת בני ישמעאל בן אברהם אחות נוויות אל נשב לו לאישה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתנו תורה כאמת בחיי עולם נתן ברכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. We're going to pause briefly and invite God to bring healing to those who are in need of healing at this time as we offer a Mishaberach L'Cholim. Chazan Agar is now headed over to lead our junior congregation, and I'll be heading over there in about a half hour. So we're doing tag team clergy this morning. But in the meantime, I want to invite you to hold in your hearts and minds the names and faces of those in your lives in need of healing as we offer a Mishaberach L'Cholim. As I pause in the middle of the bracha, please fill that silence with those people you know who are in need of healing. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yivarech v'Yirapeh et HaCholim et. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Alehem L'Hachizkam L'Rapotam V'Yishlach Lehem Eira Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Urefuat HaGuf B'toch Shar Chol Yisrael Shabbat Him Lizok Hashta Bagalav Izman Kariv V'Nomar Amen. We're going to invite Ivy to come and do the Maftir Aliyah for us as we invite Rabbi Lehman to be called for the Maftir Aliyah. You'll find it on verse 7. On page 161, and again, this is our final in-person Rabbi Lehman experience. We celebrated him last Shabbat, but we're so glad he's here to chant Haftarah for us this morning. A little anticlimactic, yes. All right, Ivy, you want to take the yad, and this is where it ends, so it Vayishma should be right around here. There it is. There, you got it.
Baruch et Adonai hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayishma Yaakov el Aviv ve'el imo vayelech padana Aram vayera Esav ki ra'ot banot Kenan be'enai Yitzhak Aviv vayelech Esav el Yishmael vayikach et Michalat bat Yishmael ben Avraham achot nivot anishav lo la'isha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We say Yishar Kochech to Ivy on reading Torah for us this morning. Rabbi, Thank you for wearing that suit for us this morning, as always. And Richard, why don't you come and oh, we have someone who's, all right, Renee is we invite those who are able to rise as the Torah will be now lifted and dressed. Oh yeah, always the shoes. V'zot HaTorah, v'zot HaTorah asher sama Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai Tetzei Torah Hashem b'Yerushalayim Ki Mitzion Tetzei Torah Hashem b'Yerushalayim Ruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato b'mitzion Emes Torah u'dvar Hashem b'Yerushalayim b'mitzion Shkoch Hashem Yerushalayim. Please be seated. Rabbi Lehman, did you want to introduce the Haftarah?
No.
All right.
I'm looking for the Haftarah book.
Where's the Haftarah book? Did you bring one? Because it's not usually here unless you.
Right.
I mean, there's the Chumash. Are you okay with that? Okay. So the Haftarah is from Malachi, who was our last prophet, and his name means my messenger. So scholars actually think that it might not have actually referred to a person particularly, but a person who saw himself as a messenger of God. And again, it's connected to the parasha because Esav is understood to be an Edomite, and the Edomites were historically enemies of the people of Israel, and the Edomites during the time of this prophecy have looted Jerusalem, and the Israelites are once again in exile and questioning whether or not God is still in relationship to them. And Malachi offers assurance of God's continued love and care of the people. You'll find the Haftarah beginning on page 163 of the Chumash.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'neviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai Habocher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. Masa devar Adonai el Yisrael b'yad malachi ahavti etchem amar Adonai v'amartem b'meh ahavtanu Halo ach Esav liYaakov ne'um Adonai va'ohav et Yaakov vet Esav saneiti v'asim et harav shmama vet nachalato letanot midbar ki tomar Edom rushashnu v'nashu v'nivnech oravot ko amar Adonai tzavaot Hema yivnu v'ani eros v'karu lahem gevul risha v'ha'am asher za'am Adonai ad olam v'einechem tirena v'atem tomru yigdal Adonai me'al gevul Yisrael bein yechabet av ve'even Adonav Vim avi ani aye kavodi Vim adonim ani Aye morai, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, Lachem HaKohanim, Bozei Shemi, Vamartem, Vamevazinu et Shemecha, Magishim al Mizbechi, Lechem Megoal, Vamartem Bamegealnucha, Vemorchem, Shulchan Adonai Nivzehu, V'chi Tagishun Iver, Lizboach, Ein Ra, V'chi Tagishu, Biseach V'chole, Ein Ra, Hakrivehu Na, Lefechatecha, Hayirtzecha, O Hayisaf Anecha, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, Va'ata, Chaluna F'nei El V'yichanenu, V'miyedachem Hayata Zot, Hayisa Mikem Panim, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, Mi Gam Bachem V'yizkar Delatayim, V'lo Ta'iru Mizbechi Chinam, Ein li Chayfetz Bachem, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, Umincha lo ertze miyedechem, Ki mimizrach shemesh va'ad mevo'o, Gadol shemi bagoyim, Uvechol makom, Muktar mugash, Lishmi umincha tehorah, Ki gadol shemi bagoyim, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, Va'atem mechalalim oto, Bemorchem, Shulchan Adonai Megoal Hu, V'nivo nivze ochlo, V'amartem, Hine mitla'a, V'hipachtem oto, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, V'havetem gazul, V'et hapiseach v'et hacholeh, V'hevetem et hamincha, ha'ertze ota, mi'edachem Amar Adonai, V'arur nochel, V'yesh be'edro zachar, V'noder, V'zoveach moshchat l'Adonai, Ki melech gadol ani, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, Ushemino Rav Agoyim, Va'ata Aleichem, HaMitzvah Hazot HaKohanim, Im lo tishma'u, V'im lo tasimu alev, Lateit kavod lishmi, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, V'shilachti v'achem et ha'me'era, V'aroti et birkotechem, V'gam aroti ha, Ki einchem samim alev, Hineni go'er lachem et hazera, V'zireti feresh al penechem, Peresh chagechem, V'nasa etchem elav, Vidatem, Ki shilachti aleichem, Et ha-mitzvah hazot, Liot briti et Levi, Amar Adonai Tzavaot, Briti hayata ito, Ha-chayim v'ha-shalom, V'etneim lo mora, V'yira'eni, U'mipnei shemi nichathu, Torah emet hayata befihu, V'avla lo nimtza bisvatav, V'shalom u'v'mishor halach iti, V'rabim heishiv me'avon, Ki siftei chochein yishmeru dat, V'torah yavakshu mipihu, Ki malach Adonai Tzavaot hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Tzur kol haolamim, Tzaddik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'yoseh, ha'medaber u'makayem, she'kol devarav emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim devarecha, v'davar echad midvarecha, achor lo yashuv rekam, ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata, Baruch ata Adonai,
Baruch Shema.
ha'el ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav.
Amen.
Rachem al Tzion ki beit chayenu, v'lalu vat nefesh toshia, b'mheira v'yameinu, Baruch ata Adonai,
Baruch Shema.
Misameach Tzion b'vaneha.
Amen.
Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu, B'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha, u'v'malchut Beit David Meshichecha, b'mheira v'yavo v'yagel libeinu, al kiso lo yeshev zar, v'lo yinchalu od acherim et kavodo, ki v'shem kodshecha nishbata lo, shelo yichbe neiro le'olam va'ed, Baruch ata Adonai,
Shema.
Magen David, al haTorah ve'al havodah ve'al hanavim ve'al yom haShabbat hazeh, shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu, likedusha ve'limnucha, lechavod u'letif'aret. Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu, anachnu modim lach, u'mevarachim otach, Yitbarach Shimcha befi kol chai, tamid le'olam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai, mekadesh haShabbat.
Amen. Let's sing a Siman Tov to Rabbi Lehman for his Haftarah and wishing him well in his new adventures. Siman Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Siman Tov, Siman Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Siman Tov, Siman Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Siman Tov. Yehelanu, 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 Ulecha Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulecha Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulecha Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulecha Yisrael. Yasher Koach.
That was my swan song.
And that was his swan song. Last week was his honoring, and that was his last gift to the... Thank you, Rabbi Lehman. I want to just make a couple of announcements because, as I said, there are a few logistical things happening today, since I'll be heading over to the junior congregation in about 15 minutes. So we'll be doing things a little out of order. I'm going to give a Devar Torah at this point. Following that, Ivy and Dave, would you do the prayer for Israel? That was Don's suggestion, a very nice thing. Following that, prayer for our country. Steve, can I get you to be on board to do Musaf, just Eitz Chaim He, and then right into the Musaf while we're doing the transition from when I leave and the cantor comes. So are we all good with that? Excellent. Also, I do want to make sure I remember to announce this, because I will not be here at the end of the service, that unfortunately a long time member of our community, Manny Greenberg, Zichrono Livracha, passed away on Friday afternoon, and his funeral will be taking place on Monday at 2 p.m. at Montefiore, a graveside service, and then Shiva will be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evening at their residence at 7 p.m. So our condolences to the entire Greenberg family on Manny's passing. And Steve, if you'll let the cantor know, there are other announcements that he can announce that are right next to on the table, or you can even announce them yourself. Very happy to have you do announcements. So I want to just reflect on the fact that we were talking about difficult family systems in the book of Genesis, and what's a bit sad about Yaakov is that he seems to spend a lot of his life looking for things that he doesn't have. So he obviously, as we see in this week's parashah, he barters Esav's bracha that's meant for him when his brother is starving from being out in the fields for a bowl of lentil soup. And he seems to desire things that he doesn't have. And at the end of this book of the Torah, at the end of the book of Genesis, Yaakov says these words about thinking about his life. He says, At v'ra'im hayu yemei shnei chayai. He says, few and painful and difficult have been the years of my life. And he says this even though his family has finally reconvened in Egypt after the famine, and they are finally prospering. He seems to have spent his entire life looking for more, looking for what he doesn't have, imagining that his source will go away if only he had something else. And in the course of his life, he overlooks the many blessings that he has, the children that he has, the riches that he accumulates throughout his life. But what he seems to say at the end is that it's been a tough life. Few and difficult have been my years here on this earth. Contrast that vision with the vision of his son Yosef, who's had certainly as many hardships as his father had, being imprisoned in Egypt, sold into slavery by his brothers. And yet, at the time in which his brothers reveal themselves to him, instead of resentment, he's able to say that he's able to forgive his brothers and to say that this was all part of God's larger plan, that this should have happened. And he's able then to see the life that he's been given, despite its hardships, as one that has many blessings. And what we learn from these two characters is that we actually have a great deal of control over how we experience our lives through how it is that we tell the story of them. All of us will have facts in our lives that are inescapably true. All of us have blessings and disappointments in our lives. But what's the story we tell about our lives? When we are able to hold on to hope in the midst of our most difficult challenges, we're often better able to look back on the difficult times of our lives and understand that sometimes, not always, but sometimes the most painful and difficult times in our lives have had meaning and have helped shape the people that we become. And that happens when we're able to live with a sense of hope. And one of the things I want to talk about this morning is the difference between hope and optimism. It's an idea that we read over and over again in the writings of the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, who talks about this concept on the difference between hope and optimism in at least two of his books and throughout many of his writings. Rabbi Sachs says that optimism is a feeling that however bad things might be at the moment, things are going to get better. They just will get better. Optimism is an emotion. You don't have to do anything to be an optimist. You just have to believe that somehow things will get better. By contrast, hope is the sense that if things are bad at the moment, that we have to work to do something to make things better. In this way, hope is not an emotion. Hope actually looks like a noun, but it functions like a verb. It demands something of us. It demands that we act. When we hope, we have to act to make things more hopeful. And Rabbi Sachs says that we Jews are not really aptly characterized as an optimistic people, because given our historical circumstances, we don't just have a feeling that things are going to get better, but we are a profoundly hopeful people, he says, because we work to make things better. In the language of our people's national anthem, Hatikva, Od Lo Tikvatenu, we have never lost our hope. So what do we do to actually make hope happen in our lives? What do we do to create hope? Well, there's just one example I want to give from the book of Genesis, and then I want to talk about a more contemporary example. Abraham is all alone after Sarah dies. And Isaac sees that his father is alone and worries that he is lonely. But he doesn't just worry. He actually works to make his father's life better. According to the Midrash, Yitzchak goes to the town where Hagar and Ishmael live, a place that's called Be'er L'chai Ro'i, and he recommends Hagar to Avraham. And their relationship is actually rekindled after Sarah dies. And in this last chapter of Abraham's life, we don't really talk about this that much, we Jews, because Hagar is associated with Ishmael. But they remarry and have 6 more children together. Isaac is the one who brings them together and activates the hope. So how do we take what we have and make it better? I want to tell you a story that I learned from my colleague, Rabbi Wes Garden-Schwartz. That's an expression of hope that I found incredibly moving. In 1938, a 10-year-old boy named Wolfgang Wilhelm Franz Hallo experienced Kristallnacht. He lived in a house in Frankfurt in Germany, and it was attacked by the Nazis. It was ransacked and shattered glass all over the place. And as a 10-year-old, he watched terrified, holding on to the leg of his grandfather. 1 year later, this 11-year-old now, Wolfgang, boarded a train from Germany to England as part of the Kindertransport. Many of you know that the Kindertransport was a rescue program in which England agreed to permit unaccompanied Jewish children from Germany under the age of 17 to come into the country. Many of these children obviously left their parents behind, and in many cases never saw their parents again in order to live with a non-Jewish British family. So this 11-year-old boy and his 2 older sisters were able to get out of Germany on one of the last trains. When he boarded this train, this 11-year-old was holding a Kiddush cup that contained an engraving with the name Wolfgang, his name, on it. It was a present that his family had received at his bris. Now, the Nazis allowed Jews who were leaving on the Kindertransport to take with them 1 ounce of silver. But this Kiddush cup was originally 2 ounces. And so the cup was given to a silversmith before Wolfgang was put on this Kindertransport. And the silversmith actually carved the stem that held the cup up off so that it would be reduced from a 2-ounce Kiddush cup to a 1 ounce. It essentially just had the cup in it. And it was still, of course, able to hold liquid, but it had no stem. So he clutched this Kiddush cup as he got on this transport and went to Birmingham, England, where he lived for a year until 1942. And then he went on a ship to Canada, continuing to hold his Kiddush cup, and continued to have it when he arrived in New York City, Grand Central Station, with literally a nickel, a penny, and that Kiddush cup. He was an 11-year-old boy who, before his bar mitzvah, had gone from Germany to England to Canada to New York, and he would end up becoming Professor William Hallo, who became one of the world's leading experts on the ancient Near East and also one of the world's leading scholars on the philosophy of the Jewish philosopher Franz Rosenzweig. He taught at Yale University for 40 years, and he used that cut-down Kiddush cup every Friday night to make Kiddush with his families. He had carried it with him on the Kindertransport out of Germany, but it would grace his Shabbat dinner table in New Haven, Connecticut for over 4 decades. That Kiddush cup was once held by a frightened 11-year-old boy, and this past year, my colleague Rabbi Garden-Schwartz, who officiated at the wedding of his granddaughter in Boston, used that same Kiddush cup to marry Bill Hallo's granddaughter. That Kiddush cup which had to be cut down and its stem had to be taken off, functioned as a symbol of rebirth, of renewal, of love, of creating of new life, and it served as a symbol of hope for the future of this man's family. And that Kiddush cup is in many ways the story of the Jewish people. And it's what Rabbi Sachs was trying to teach us about the difference between optimism and hope. We Jews are a people of hope. What we do is to take what is and we work to try to make it better. We strive to avoid giving in to despair, even when the circumstances of our lives are bitter. And so we're reminded in that story that each of us gets to tell the story of our own lives. We get to write the narrative. Will it be one of hope or despair? Each of us has to strive through both our blessings and our suffering to raise the cup that we have, to raise the cup and say l'chaim, to life. Shabbat Shalom. Don and Ivy and Dave, I'm giving this over to you and then to Steve. The Chazan will return probably in about 5 to 10 minutes, but you guys know what you're doing. Prayer for Israel. First prayer for our country. Don, prayer for Israel. Ivy and Dave. Eitz Chaim, Steve, and then Musaf. And hopefully we'll see some of you following the service here. If you're staying for lunch, we have lunch that you can eat indoors, outdoors, or take with you to go. And I wish you all Shabbat Shalom. Oh, you can Rob. You can go to junior congregation. 100%. Yeah. All right. Good Shabbos, everyone.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi, thank you. Today, friends, I'm wearing a T-shirt with a Liberty Bell on it, and it's honor of our veterans. Veterans Day is coming up this week, so I dedicate this prayer to our country, to our veterans who have done so much to ensure our freedom and our democracy. Thank you. Please join me. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah, that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony to banish hatred and bigotry and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore, and let us say amen. 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 Ivy and Dave. Thank you, thank you.
Just Ivy. All right. Please join me on page 149 at the top. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Sur Yisrael v'go'alo, Barech et Mininat Yisrael, Reshit Simchat Gulatenu. Hagen alecha v'vrachastecha ufros alecha sukat shlemecha ufshlat orcha v'matecha l'shorecha sarecha v'yotzecha b'taknein b'etzah tova milfanecha hazek ed yidei mignei eretz kachenu v'chan hilein Eloheinu Yeshua v'ateret nitzahon tatrin v'nantata shalom ba'aretz v'simchat olam li'yoshvecha v'nomar amen.
Be seated. We'll recite Ashrei together. Page 151. Ashrei Ashrei Ve'techa Yehalucha Selah. Ashrei Am Shekachalo. Ashrei Am Shadonai Elohav Tila LaDavid.
דור לדור לשבת מעשיך חדר כבוד הודך. זכר תוכל לבי, טוב עלינו, ידוך לבי, טוב עלינו. הנה כל אלה שבזה, פותח את ידיך מביע. תהילת אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך כל בשר, שם קדשו לעולם ועד, ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם, hallelujah. Please rise. Eitz Chaim hi, למחזיקים בו, ותומך מיושר דרכך דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיך שלום השיבנו אדוני standing. We'll continue on page 155 with Chatzi Kaddish and then the Amidah. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabba v'alma divrach yirutei v'amlich malchutei b'chayechon v'mechon v'chayedecho Beit Yisrael b'galav yizman kari v'yimeru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach v'olam olam me'amaya Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitbar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitalev, V'yitalal, Shemei Dekudesha, Barichu, Li'ela, Min Kol Berchata V'shirata, Tush Bechata V'nechemata, Damiran B'yolma, V'yimeru, Amen. Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ho'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol, v'Zocher Hasdei Avot, U'Mevi Goel Livnei v'Nehem, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיח ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה, אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיח, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופך חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, משני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומידו מלך, ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמנתה לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. נריצך ונקדישך כסוד שיח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל ארץ כבודו Kevodo mahale mahale olam aye mekom kevodo. Kevodo mahale mahale olam aye mekom kevodo. Kevodo mahale mahale olam meshad tav shoalim zelaz aye mekom kevodo. Meshar tav shoalim zelaz aye mekom kivodo liumataham baruch yomeru baruch kivod Adonai mim komo hu yifen verachamim veyachonam Amam Yachadim Shemo Erev Avoker Becho Yom Tamid Pamayim Bi'ahava Shema Omrim Shema Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Vehu Yashmienu, Berachamav, Shenid Li'enei Kol Chai, Vehu Yashmienu, Berachamav, Shenid Li'enei Kol Chai. Liot lachem le'elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Uv'divrei kadshecha katuv le'mor Adonai Elohim V'dor v'dor Yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohayech Tzion L'dor v'dor Hallelujah L'dor v'dor nagid gadlecha U'netzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish V'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yomush li'olam va'ed Ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata Baruch ata Adonai ha'el hakadosh. Silently through 161. Ose shalom bimramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Page 181, Kaddish Shalem. Yitkadav Yitkadash Shemei Rabba Yolama Divrachi Rutevi Amlich Malchute B'chayechon V'mechon V'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael B'agalav Yisman Kori V'yimeru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Ulam Me'amaya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitbar V'yitrumam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitalev V'yitolol Shemei D'kudish Abrichu Le'ela Min Kol Berchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damiram B'yolma V'yimeru Amen Titkabal Tzlotahon V'tahon D'chol Yisrael Kadam Avahon D'Vishmaya V'yimeru Amen Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen Oseh Shalom B'imramav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen Ein Keloheinu Ein Kadonenu Ein Kimalkeinu Ein Kemoshienu Micheloheinu Michadonenu Michemalkeinu Michemoshienu Nodel Eloheinu Nodel Adonenu Nodel Malkeinu Nodel Moshienu Baruch Eloheinu Baruch Adonenu Baruch Malkeinu Baruch Moshienu Atahu Eloheinu Atahu Adonenu Atahu Malkeinu Atahu Moshienu Atahu Shetiru Avotenu Lefanecha Et Ketoret Hasamim Ein Keloheinu Ein Kadonenu Ein Kimalkeinu Ein Kemoshienu Aleinu L'shabeach Ladon HaKol Latet Gdula V'yoseh B'reshit Shelo Asanu Kigoyei Haratzot Velo Samanu K'mishpachot Ha'adama Shelo Sam Chelkeinu Kahem V'goraleinu Kechol Hamonam V'anachnu Korim Umishtachavim Umodim Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kakatu b'tor techadonayim loch le'olam va'ed v'nemar v'hoya Adonai le'melech al kol ha'aretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. May be seated. In love, we remember those who no longer walk this earth. We are grateful to God for the gift of their lives, for the joys we shared, and for the cherished memories that never fade. May God grant those who mourn the strength to see beyond their sorrow, sustaining them despite their grief. May the faith that binds us to our loved ones be a continuing source of comfort as we invite those who mourn and those who are remembering your sight to praise God's name with the words of the Kaddish. Please rise and join me. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabba B'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kori v'imru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam u'lamei omaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar, v'yitalev, v'yitalal, shemei, d'kudisha, b'rechu. le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, damiran b'olma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. There are some announcements. You are more than welcome to read.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good to see all of you. We have a lot going on this week. The Thanksgiving walk/run has been postponed to a date that's going to be decided. But the pantry is still asking for donations to help people who are in need with their Thanksgiving meal. So you can find that online if you'd like to donate. Otherwise, we have a lot of programs this week. On Monday, we have meditation, mindful meditation. On Tuesday, Rabbi GK has his class at 8 p.m. and it's a study of Aviva Zornberg's book. On Wednesday, you can join the men's club is having a board meeting at 7:30 p.m. and they'll be inaugurating the new president. That will be at 7:30 on Wednesday. On Thursday, I have a class at 5:30, History of Tefillah. So if you'd like to learn more about history of prayers and the relationship with music, you can join. And on Friday, we're doing here in person in synagogue also a live stream, World Music Shabbat. It's going to be a service of flamenco style music and a little bit Indian. So it should be very fun, upbeat, and participatory. So please join us then. That'll be this coming Friday at 6 p.m. And of course, next week we have Shabbat services at 9:30 a.m. Following conclusion of these services, Ivy and David Mernelstein have sponsored very graciously the Kiddush, so you can join us for extended Kiddush. There are going to be some bagged meals on the way out, but those are for people who aren't staying. So if you aren't staying, feel free to take one of those. If you aren't, go straight to the extended Kiddush. Yes. So with that, Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
And
Adon Olam. You want to choose? You choose.
You can go ahead.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Naso B'Chefzo Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'acharei Kichlot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora Vehu Haya Vehu Hoveh Vehu Yiyeh B'Tifara Vehu Yiyeh B'Tifara Vehu Echad Ve'en Sheni Laham Shilo Leach Bira Beli Reshit Beli Tachlit Velo ha'oz v'ha'misra, velo ha'oz v'ha'misra, vehu eli v'chai go'ali, v'tzor hevli v'yetzara, vehu nisi umanosli, menat kosi beyom ekra, menat kosi beyom ekra, Beyado Avkid Ruchi Beyet Ishan Beyayira V'im Ruchi Geviati Adonai Li Velo Ira Adonai Li Velo Ira.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Kiddush will be in the Fishman.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for letting me do this.
Oh, of course.
It was an honor.
Yes.
Doing all right?
Yes, yes.
Good.
And you?
Fine. Same stuff, different day. Good. Okay. So I'm gonna go. We'll go and say goodbye. Say Shabbat. We're gonna do Kiddush over there.